Good morning, everyone. Welcome to INSPINAR, your inspirational seminar. INSPINAR is a 30-minute conversation designed to empower us all with the roadmap for a more peaceful and productive life. I'm your host, Dr. Nidhi Gupta. Thank you for making time today. Thank you for moving things around on your calendar. It means a big deal to me. Thank you for being here today. The question for today's episode is evolution of the middle school student in the last 4 years, the good and the worrisome. This is a question that speaks to my passion. This is a question that speaks to what I do as a life technology advocate. And to speak to the intention of this question, I have with me Rhonda Sillesky, a teacher with 28 years of experience. And I will introduce you formally to Rhonda in just a minute. But before that, I first met Rhonda in context of my event, Reconnect Atlanta, which she attended with her family. After the event, Rhonda claims that she and her family were transformed. But you know what? I was a better person because of the feedback, because of the passion, because of the belief that Rhonda has in my work and what I'm doing. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'm going to introduce you next to the audience. This is Rhonda's 28th year in education. 4 years ago, she retired to go into business for herself in financial services, which she still does on the side. Earlier this year, in March 2022, she received a call asking her to come back into the classroom, and it felt absolutely right to her. So she jumped back in. After all, teaching is her passion, and she certainly felt that is what she was called to do. In the few months that she has been back in the classroom, she has made some fascinating observations about some of the changes that she has seen in the middle school child in the short 4 years. Rhonda is also a proud mother of 2 beautiful daughters, 22 and 24 years old. They have always been a big part of Rhonda's why as an educator.
Definitely.
Thank you, Rhonda. So tell us a little bit about your story. Why and how did you become a teacher? What is your story?
Yes. So it was kind of neat the way I got into it. I had a degree. I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. So the psychology courses were interesting. So that's what I did. And I had several professors that I became very close to, a husband and a wife, and they drove to Atlanta after I had my degree and said, we have a new program where you can get certified to teach and get your master's as well. And I can't explain why. It just, again, it was one of those God things where it felt right. And I followed their lead, and I went back to Auburn at Montgomery and did that just to teach, because they always believed they saw me as a teacher. And it was so neat because once I got in that classroom, and I always have been in the middle school classroom, always. That's just, I love that age group completely. So, once I got in there, I knew that was what I was supposed to be doing. And that's what I've done. It's just who I am.
So you taught for 28 years before you retired?
I did. Oh, well, 27 years before I retired. And then now I'm back in my 28th year.
And what did you notice when you returned?
Well, a lot of things. And, what I do know for sure is that the middle school child, the nature of the middle school child, that part hasn't changed. I mean, they're cute little hearts, their senses of humor that are developing. They can be scared one minute and super happy the next minute, and then crying again another minute. It's a beautiful chaotic time for them. But there has been a lot of changes that I've seen as far as attention span. And my teacher friends will tell me that they believe COVID and cell phones probably together play a role in a lot of this. But attention span in particular is a big one. Motivation, I see a difference there. I mean, I kind of have to do a lot to keep them engaged. So I realize I have to change things up more often than I did before during a class time, just to keep them engaged and a part of it. I've noticed some differences in their reading levels as far as word recognition. And I personally think that has to do with, I don't know for sure, but I have to believe that the cell phone is playing a role in that. Just simple words that, identifier words that I realize they'll come up and say, I'm just not sure what this is. And before, when I gave a test or something, that was never an issue. So I'm seeing things like that. Less eye contact, a lot less eye contact when I'm, moving around in the halls and talking with them. That has definitely changed, and maybe some diminishing social skills in a bit. So several things.
That's really worrisome. When you mention lack of motivation, lack of communication skills, not able to make eye contact, some decline in reading ability, some decline in sustained attention. I'm sure there is a spectrum of students who even before COVID were on either one end of the spectrum and some were at the other end of the spectrum. Do you think things have gotten worse over the last 4 years?
I do. I think you can combine it with, I do think you can combine it with COVID. The only reason I say that, I've just talked to so many teacher friends that just say the two went hand in hand to them. But with those things in particular that we just talked about, absolutely, with the middle school child, absolutely. And like I was telling you earlier, I had a conversation with one of my middle school students, just asking her about, cell phones. And, she said, I would just be very, very, very sad if I didn't have my cell phone in my hand. And she meant it. It was, I need it to talk to my friends, period. So there it is.
It is a sad reality. It is a really sad reality that little children as young as in middle school think or have such strong conviction that they would be sad if they did not have their cell phone because they don't know any better. They haven't experienced what sadness truly means or what real life connections truly mean.
Yes.
And it is sad on so many levels.
Well, I told her to give me, some words, and she said sad, and then she said, I'd be bored. And she said, my friends would think that I'm not communicating with them. So I'm not talking with them and they would be upset with me. And that just can't happen. And she said, I have a Snapchat, they call it something where they have a run where they may have like 360 something days where in a row where they send a quick picture to their friends. And she said, I cannot break that streak. She said, I will sneak out of the house if I lose my phone because I have to keep my streak going. So that means something to them,
So on school level, Rhonda, is there any kind of education program? I'm not sure if elementary school children are ready for education, but middle school child most definitely might be receptive, and high school children definitely. At schools, is there any education program to help children understand the science behind this addictive habit so that it's not just another fad? They understand the health complications, the mental and physical health complications of this thing, which to them is fun and an escape from boredom.
Right. We do have, we have a time called focus time where we can do, social skills and work on, various parts of, social part. And, they do have little programs that they bring in. I don't know how receptive they are at this age. They don't want to hear that. So that's for sure. So it'd have to be just the right program to somehow meet them where they are so that they don't feel like we're trying to say, you can't do that now. They need to know that we're coming beside them somehow, and that perhaps there might be a compromise or something like that, because it's funny because I don't allow them in my classroom. I do not. It's up to each teacher. But it's so funny. They just need to know it's in, like I watch them and they'll touch it. They just need to know it's there. It really is that tangible to them.
Do they understand that this behavior, I'm sure, and I think I know the answer to this, middle school children will say no, that this behavior is not very different from addictive behavior?
Well, I even used that word with the student I taught with. I said, do you think it's an addiction? And she said, no, but I sure don't want to do without it. I would be sad. So yeah, I don't think they put that together.
Yeah. You also mentioned, Rhonda, that the student you talked to, she mentioned one of the words as boredom. What can a middle school child do to not feel bored if a teacher like you, a conscientious teacher like you, tells them that this is the next hour where you cannot have your device? And the child says, well, I'm bored. What do I do with myself? So, what would you tell them to fill their boredom with so that they don't feel deprived?
Right, right. And that's exactly what they say. I'm bored. And days that I would have a test in the past, when I have a test, I love those days because it was a peaceful day for the teacher. It's peaceful. And they would get out their books and read after the test. And I was like, yes, this is good. And the first time I gave a test here, I was excited. I thought this is going to be a good day. And I told them to get out their books, and they're like, we don't have, they don't have books anymore. And so I said, well, we got to figure it out because you're not going to be on your cell phones. And they truly didn't know what to do with, they were fidgety. They just anxious. It was interesting. So that's when my light bulb went off. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. And so now I write passes to the library and make them go get a book, and they actually will read. So, hey, if they're not forced to do it, but when they're out of options, you know, they at least in class, they may read. One kid told me this morning that if they were bored enough, they'd go outside and play. And I'm like, there it is. Go outside and play. Put the phones down. But they didn't want to hear the put the phone down part. But he said, if I had to, I'll go play.
Wow. Have you also noticed any issues such as increased anxiety, increased depression, moodiness, loneliness in the middle school child?
Well, and you know, with the middle school child, there's a plethora of that anyway. You know, they're just all over the place. But with that being said, my answer would be, from just what I'm seeing myself, would be yes, hands down. And I would say anxiety more than anything. And like I was telling you earlier with the eye contact, just, you know, because we greet them at our door, you know, hey, how you doing? Some of them, I mean, just to go is enough for them. It's painful to look you up, you know, and say, hi, how are you? Or having a good day, or, you know, anything like that. That's really hard. More, and I'm seeing that more than I ever have in the past. Now, is it COVID? Is it cell phone? You know, it could be a combination of things, but anxiety is definitely ramped up, no doubt about it.
It could be that they both fed into each other and have now made it a vicious cycle through which, as a parent, as an educator, it's really hard for us to brainstorm ideas of what is the alternative. Well, my child needs their cell phone because that is the only way I can keep a track of them. It gives me a sense of safety. I can always reach them, and I can't imagine a life without it. And unless we as a community decide that this is not normal, even though we have at a very subconscious level normalized this behavior, this is not normal. This is not normal for our own sake and for the sake of our adolescents and teenagers, not normal for their physical health, for their mental health. It's not. Rhonda, you and I grew up in a time where we didn't have screens in our hand.
Right.
And a lot of times I get asked this by older people, grandparents, that, well, I'm now 60 and I recently started using the phone only a couple of years ago. Is there a propensity for me to be addicted? I tell them yes, irrespective of what age. There is a propensity to be addicted because cell phone addiction is not very different from drug abuse or alcohol addiction or gambling or video gaming or internet addiction. So how do you think our childhood was different from the childhood of a middle school or a high school children in the current generation? What are they missing? Or what extra do they have that we did not have? What are the pros and cons?
You know, it's funny. I was actually been writing that, the pros and cons, because I know there can be pros to it. But I was, you know, back when I went to your Reconnect Atlanta, and like I was saying, I was taking my daughters as a mom, being a good mom, to let them know that we got to pay attention to the cell phone stuff. And then you gave that test, and I'm sitting there taking the test with my little notepad, and I was like, oh oh my gosh. And I scored higher than one of my girls. So I was mortified. So I was a wake up call. It was time to pay attention to that. Well, and then my girls said the same thing. Now they're a little older, 22 and 24, so they can reason it. But even a high school student that I spoke with last week recognized that the cell phone can be too much. They told me that it can be too much and there needs to be a balance. I love it when a high schooler can give you that wisdom, like, yes, there needs to be a balance. Now, the middle schooler I talked to this morning, the cute girl, and I have to mention this too, she said, Miss Sillesky, if you want to give me a shout out, my name, I'm up for it. And I was like, I'll keep it private, but I'll let her know. I'll let you know. You know, she said, I think we should be allowed to have them. Personally, I think we should be allowed to have them, but only when we finish our work, because I recognize I will probably not do my work if I have my cell phone right there. I'm like, you're a middle school girl telling me this. This is beautiful. So they know. But yes, they've always had it in their hand. Always. You know, we had options, you know, to go play, to go do and be, and they're streamlined with their phone. Period. I mean, it's. I almost wish you have to come have lunch with me here at the school, and because at lunch they can have their cell phones, and you can look out, and most of them are heads are down. They're not. They're texting their friends maybe across the lunchroom, but not talking with the people right in front of them. It's fascinating.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. That hit a really sore spot.
Yeah.
Texting while eating lunch in the school setting, which is permissible by the school communities. I don't think I can blame the children here anymore. There is so much work that needs to be done in educating the teachers, in educating the educational institutions, in helping them understand that by being more flexible or by pandering to the interests or wants of the children, they're actually doing more damage.
Yeah, and I probably think too, it's the wants of a lot of parents. Their kids having that phone with them during the day is a safety net for parents. And many times, if I've had to get on a student with a cell phone, it's because they're actually texting mom or dad. And I just call them up and let them know that this is why the consequence is there, but we can't do that, at least not during my class. So it's a lesson. It's the adult. We're doing it to them.
Yes. Which brings me to the other aspect of cell phone addiction or cell phone use, and that is outside of the school. How does cell phone addiction affect you, your family, your own children, your own relationships personally, if it does?
Oh, it does. So we've been dealing with cell phones with my kids since, I guess, about 10 years, because I waited till they were teenagers before we allowed them to have their cell phone. And it was interesting because my older daughter, who's 2 years older than her sister, we could take her cell phone away as a consequence, and she could handle it. But just that 2-year gap right there with my younger one, if we took her cell phone away, oh my gosh, the world ended in our household for a couple of nights. It was just a big deal to her. And so you can just see it as so I can only imagine the younger kids today that have had them in their hands from the get-go. I personally have had to, I'm serious, after that Reconnect Atlanta, I have to, even now, I have to go, oh gosh, here I am again, I'm back playing. I can get right back on it, and I have to make a conscientious effort to put it away. I have to. And it's not easy. So here's an adult saying that. I can only imagine for younger people.
That is so true. And now more and more research, more and more science has proven that any addictive habit, any repetitive addictive stimulation can cause permanent changes in our brain, structural and functional changes in our brain, especially a part of the brain which is right here in the front. It's the frontal lobe. It's called the prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex modulates or controls all of our executive functioning skills. The executive functioning skills, some of which you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, Rhonda: motivation, task initiation, sustained attention, processing, working memory, emotion regulation. These are all super important executive functioning skills that are modulated and controlled by prefrontal cortex. From over 30 years of research of addiction medicine, we now know that repetitive addictive stimuli impairs permanently the development of prefrontal cortex. That is why I am extremely worried about infants, toddlers, and elementary school students who are exposed to wireless mobile devices early on in their life. There are two ages, one between the ages of 5 to 7, and then between the ages of 11 to 13 years, where maximum development in prefrontal cortex happens. And if during that time, those children are exposed to repetitive addictive stimuli, there is a chance they might find it very challenging to develop and sustain these executive functioning skills. So when your high school student talks about balance, I'm 100% on board. As you were there at Reconnect Atlanta, Tara and I never talk about giving up smartphones, giving up pleasure. It's about finding joy to replace the pleasure so that we don't feel deprived. It's about finding the balance. So as a teacher, as a mother, what are some of the things that you do, Rhonda, to maintain a balance so that you and your family and your daughters can continue to use their smartphones for all of its benefits, but still keep it from becoming a habit forming or an addictive device?
Right. Well, as a parent, like my girls are grown, so we can have that conversation as young adults and adults. So, and they're on board. So thank goodness for that. Now, as a teacher, I know this. I know that. I teach science, and that's probably an advantage in a lot of ways because we can do a lot of hands-on things. And so, like yesterday, we did a lab, for example, and I was just fascinated because this has been on my mind knowing I was going to be talking with you. And as soon as I can give them something to do with their hands and they're standing up out of their seat and moving around the room and even, talking with their friends in their group, as long as they're on task. But when they're doing all that, I rarely have any problems. They're engaged, they're on board, they'll even say, hey, this is fun. They're having fun without meaning to because they're doing. And so I'm just more challenged now as a teacher to have to make sure I'm doing more activities, and not every class can probably offer that. I mean, they can, but it just takes a lot more forethought and to get them going and get them moving. And I'm also changing up my lessons and we only have 45-minute classes, but about every 15 minutes, I try to switch something just to keep them moving because they get fidgety really quick. That's a huge difference in the last 4 years is how quickly they're gone.
Their attention span is shorter.
It is. I mean, it just is. And my teacher friends will say, well, it just hasn't been the same since COVID and having to do with the online learning. We haven't gotten back to normal yet. But I have to believe it's a combination.
So it basically has needed you to be more creative with changing your assignments. And I think as a parent of toddlers or parents of younger children, parents need to be more creative to find activities to keep their children engaged so that they don't feel the urge for the devices.
Yeah, go on family walks.
Right. It has made parenting hard. It has made parenting more challenging. And it takes all the willpower and discipline and motivation to keep your children, toddler and elementary school, away from devices by being more creative and finding more things to keep them engaged, keep their attention, and help them find real joy in that process.
There's the challenge. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. I'll pause here a little bit and see if we have any questions from the excellent audience that has joined us today. Yes, Tara.
I am wondering, as I continue to hear you, Rhonda, talk about how COVID and cell phone use together have really affected young people today, do you think that COVID forced us to be more in our screens? Not just the isolation of it, but what else were we going to do at home for 24/7?
That's what it became. I think you're exactly right. And that was their escape. And I guess escape is probably the best word I can use. In fact, the student I talked to today, she said she gets bored. So it is an escape. It's a way to go do something so they don't have to sit there just doing. And I think COVID did play a part in that. Absolutely.
This has also been an amazing reminder about the amazing work that teachers are doing every day. I mean, what every little individual with their own little stories and their own habits and their own what they face at home. And we put 30 of them in a classroom and we're like, okay, teach them. So thank you for what you do.
Love them. Yeah, thank you. I love it. So it's good.
Thank you for harnessing all your creativity in keeping the attention of the current middle school student focused in class in 15-minute increments.
Right?
That's not an easy thing.
It doesn't always work, trust me.
Oh my God.
Rhonda, I have a question.
Sure.
So this is Charlene. So I'm kind of looking at this in a different way in that even like not the middle schoolers, but what about some of the, the new moms who need to keep their child entertained, but they're also busy, doing whatever. And then they put a screen in front of that child, at 2, 3, 4 years old. And, to me, I mean, what is your thought about that? That just makes me very, very nervous because, you can start an addictive behavior probably at a very young age.
Sure. Yeah. And it's funny, you go to a restaurant and you see a family come in and they bring their technology crew set up and they set up the screens and have their kids all around with their individual screens and their headphones. And you don't hear from them for the next 2 hours and parents are eating and enjoying, but they're their kids. It's shocking. Not to be judgmental. It's like, wow, that's where we are now. It's become like a babysitter.
And to speak to your question, Charlene, I would add that a lot of new moms are probably doing it because everybody else around them is doing it. And they don't know or they don't have the knowledge of the impact this habit is having on their child. So if somehow this knowledge was to get to this new mom, I can bet you she will not do it because all mothers want to do what is the right thing to do for their children. So it's the lack of knowledge that is preventing them from changing their attitudes and practices. So I believe in the CAP model of behavior change. In order to change any behavior, you first have to empower that individual with knowledge. First, you tell them that, hey, this is what this habit is doing to your child's brain. And this is the short-term and the long-term outcome of what we might be looking. Here is the data. What do you think about it? This will get them thinking. And trust me, as Rhonda said, teachers are creative, mothers are creative. A new mom will find non-device ways to keep the child busy while she takes care of the household chores.
Yes, that's where your reconnect comes in.
Yeah, and not only that, if the behavior isn't modified or modeled the way that it should be at a very young age, then those behaviors go into the schoolroom, and then the teacher has to try to teach around a behavior that's already been so cemented. I don't know. It just seems like it's a great. You guys don't have any worries about not having work because it's something. It is something that is always going to be needed. Always with behavior modification.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Charlene. If you feel there is a platform in your community, that would be a great way for me and Tara to come and spread the message of joy, spread the message of life technology balance. We are more than happy to do so. So please always think of us.
Thank you.
So Rhonda, any closing thoughts before we finish today's episode? This was fantastic.
Well, I just want to say thank you for this conversation. It's one that needs to be, I think, out there again and again and again. So I'm on board.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights. It was absolutely eye-opening hearing it from a teacher's perspective, Rhonda. So thank you.
Thank
And I'll
you.
close today's episode of INSPINAR with my usual message. Let's reconnect with what really matters. Let's reconnect with health, joy, and efficiency. Let's ungrip devices and grip life. I will see you next time.